Thank you. Right. Welcome, everybody, to another SEND seminar. It is my absolute pleasure to have Dr. Rebecca Torrance Jenkins today. Rebecca is a teacher. She's a writer. She's an educational consultant and researcher. She has a lot of expertise in translating findings from educational neuroscience and psychology into practical insights for schools and educators. She's worked across the school sector. She was head of science, and she supports schools and children's charity in applying evidence-informed approaches to complex issues in learning and well-being. Rebecca is one of our own. She did her PhD here at the IOE, and her research focused on the cognitive and neuroeducational pedagogy and how research-based strategies can improve classroom practices. She does what we all strive to do in educational neuroscience, bridging the world of teaching, research, and real-world school practice. And she has a particular interest in how young people engage with school and the factors that shape their experience. And so today's talk is very relevant and timely. She's going to talk to us about school avoidance and anxiety from a school perspective. So without further ado, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming and giving us your time. We're really excited to hear your talk.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to get the technical side over and done with and do the screen share, and I hope this works. So is that all okay? Can you see?
Yeah, it works. Perfect.
Yeah, except I'm not on the first slide. There we go. Well, thank you very much indeed for having me, and it's lovely to be back, although digitally, back at the IOE, which is a really magical place. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. There are some great minds. So I wanted to talk really about something I feel quite passionate about, where neuroscience and school practice kind of converge. And one of those areas is school avoidance, or specifically emotionally based school avoidance. So I'm not referring to what might be called playing truant or somebody not coming for other reasons. I'm talking about children who really struggle to get through the gate for emotionally based reasons. So I'm going to go straight into it then, and I really want to tell you a story about a boy, a schoolboy. This is a true story. He was academically able, he was good at sports, and he was the show-round boy for prospective parents. But increasingly, he found it harder and harder to leave the car, to leave the house, and then to leave his bedroom, to leave his bed on school days. And over 3 years, he stopped going to school altogether for several weeks. And this is not because he wouldn't, but because his body simply couldn't. And experienced school staff told the parents and the child, we can't make allowances for him, it's not fair on the other children. And experienced parents told his parents, he can't rule the roost. And I've collected with an interview some of the things that were said to him and to his family. So the second quote there was a physical restraint. So when we've got him, the parents should leave the room. The theme of building more resilience featured quite a lot in his experience. And then there was a bit of a shift of it must be problems at home. And finally, the belief having a day at home will only make it worse the next day. It was almost as if distress were defiance, and a panic attack was a power play. And it turns out that fairness isn't treating every child the same, but it's giving each child what they need. So as Larry said in the introduction, I'm a trainer by teaching. My PhD looked at taking neuroscience findings into schools and classrooms, and I'm also a member of the Learnus Council. But I'm also a teacher who spent quite a lot of time working with children, helping to coax in those tearful, reluctant ones. And my best tool was a tortoise. I had a real life tortoise in the science department. And funnily enough, he often desperately needed feeding and cleaning out just at drop off time. My window would overlook the driveway, and I could see these children struggling to get out of the car, and some parents driving around the block a couple of times, and I'd go out and say, oh, I'm just picking some grass for the tortoise, could you help me? So I gave them a kind of stepping stone in, but I found it fascinating why so many of these children really struggled, and yet they seemed on the surface to be the kind of children who would thrive. So what was going on? I really wanted to unpick it. But the scale of the issue is significant. So the DFE said in October, just gone, they reported that the percentage of persistent absentees, that's the ones who've missed 10% or more, was 17.63%, and which equates to 1.29 million children. And the percentage of severe absentees, so missing more than half of their education, 2.26, which is 166,000 pupils, and there was a significant increase on the same time at the same time the previous year. And yet we still frame emotionally based school avoidance as a behaviour to manage rather than a distress to understand. You know, schools write plans, they hold attendance panels, they phone home, and then they wonder why it doesn't really work. Since I met Larry in November, I've actually been contacted by 3 more families whose children have been off school for EBSA, and I'm working with them at home now, and it is. I think it's something that is going to increase. I don't think this is a problem that's going away. So even if you don't understand it or you don't think it's the right way for children to behave, I don't think anyone could argue with the fact that it's a reality and it's something we definitely need to get our heads around. And I think a neuroscientific perspective is hugely useful in understanding what's going on. So I would argue that EBSA is not avoidance, it's a threat response. And I really think it's important to frame this properly, because if we get this wrong, then everything else that follows goes wrong too. So it's often talked about as avoidance, but the A in EBSA is avoidance or anxiety about school. But neurologically, it's not really what we're seeing. What we're seeing is threat response, where the nervous system has learned that school is dangerous and it responds accordingly. And once the panic circuitry is engaged, then behaviour isn't chosen, behaviour is sort of generated. So from the very beginning, I'd really love us to hold this idea that behaviour is an output. It's not the thing to fix directly. There we go. It's not the cause of the problem, it's the output. So arousal, when the system is already too loud. This is the first piece of the puzzle. So long before a child gets anywhere near school, their nervous system might already be running hot. That might be poor sleep, anticipatory stress, previous panic. All of this pushes the system into a high gain, high reactivity state. So this is it takes how strongly sensations are felt and how quickly reactions are triggered and how hard it is to calm once activated. And when arousal is high, then everything is processed as more intense, more urgent, more dangerous. So if we're asking a child to cope with school, on top of that, we're kind of already a bit too late. And this is why mornings are often the hardest. The system hasn't really even had a chance to settle down yet. So the key question really is, how reactive is the system before school even appears? And salience, the next part of the puzzle. The salience system decides on what matters most right now. So in EBSA or EBSA, school, or even thinking about school, gets tagged as urgent, as dangerous, as non-negotiable. And once that happens, then the attention narrows and reasoning tends to drop away. Nothing else seems to get in. And this is why reassuring a child, oh, it's fine, you'll be okay, you were fine yesterday, it's PE today, it's art today, don't worry, it's an early pickup. It doesn't really work. And it's why logic doesn't really work either. And telling a child, oh, I really liked school, or it's really hard, isn't it? You just have to kind of get through school. None of that really works once the salience system has re-geared itself. And the brain isn't really able to weigh options. It's just responding to what it now perceives as an emergency. So school becomes this urgent threat. And then choice sort of disappears. So once the arousal is high and the salience is locked onto threat, then the control kind of shifts. And at this point, the behavior is coming from survival circuitry. It's not coming from the thinking brain. And that's when you see the bolting, the freezing, the crying, collapsing, the shutting down. And this is crucial. It's crucial to understand that this is not a loss of control. It's like a handover of control. The system is doing exactly what it evolved to do in the presence of perceived danger. So what the child experiences here, and I really want to pause and now bring the child back in, their perspective into this discussion or this thought. So this real quote here, isn't a judgment about parents or schools. It's a description of what threat feels like from the inside. So this was talking to the boy I introduced at the beginning of my talk. He said, I just don't feel like anyone really cares. They still make me go in. He said it's really strange and nobody really wants to unpick. They just view the surface of the behaviour as that indicator of what's going on. It's not a belief, it's felt as a felt state. So when the nervous system is overwhelmed, being made to attend school doesn't feel supportive. It feels quite dangerous. And the sense of no one is listening isn't cognitive, it's more physiological. And if we miss that, we misinterpret everything that follows. So, okay, fine, but what is the effect of learning then when school is a threat? Let's kind of work backwards from the classroom. There's three parts really of the brain that are affected the most, and the three I'd like to talk about. The prefrontal cortex. As you all know, as neuroscientists, the prefrontal cortex houses functions like working memory, attention, and curiosity. Obviously, these are all required for learning. And the amygdala, or the two amygdalae, they trigger the stress response and they cause a release of adrenaline and cortisol via the HPA axis. So this is even if the danger is only perceived, it could be as small as a teacher's very sharp tone, the unpredictability of a really busy corridor, the fear of getting something wrong in front of your peers. The stress response is the same. The amygdala doesn't distinguish really between a tiger and a timetable. And then there's the they affect the they inhibit the PFC functioning, so the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. And then there's the hippocampus. This can shrink under chronic stress, and emotional memories like these ones are deeply imprinted. And the trouble here is that the hippocampus is involved in the formation of long-term memories. So feeling very stressed and threatened at school actually has a pretty catastrophic effect on a child's ability to learn. And until the child feels safe, school learning can be really very limited. So sort of why would a child's brain not teach them to avoid the same threatening situation next time, which for them is tomorrow, and it's every term time weekday after that. And yet schools still try to reason, to reward, reprimand their way out of a fight or flight response. It might be that families do too, and you hear, grandparents saying, "Oh, well, in my day, we didn't have a choice of not going to school," and father or mother might say, "Oh, I hated school, but it made me the person I am today." So the children are sort of surrounded by, I suppose, cultural beliefs that perhaps don't really match what they're experiencing, or aren't helpful to what they're experiencing. In schools send letters home and they convene panels and they call it support. But the child's body is still just hearing, okay, threat confirmed. So what if we looked at all this through a different lens and one of an environmental mismatch? So I've said here, EBSA isn't a behavioural issue or a problem child issue, it's an environmental mismatch. If you wanted to design an environment guaranteed to raise cortisol, and I will experience this as a teacher regularly, you could hardly do better than secondary school when the bell goes for break, when you've got the sixth one piling past you, everybody shunting, pushing, loud voices, laughter. It can be really intimidating, and it's intimidating as a member of staff. So if you're a child who's younger in the school, or of any age, it must also be intimidating for some of them. So this environmental mismatch between what school is demanding and what the child's nervous system can manage. So if you think of the environment, the fluorescent lighting, crowded corridors, the complex social dynamics, bells going every 50 minutes, a transition between lessons, and each one drains because you've got to remember to pack your equipment up at top speed, the teacher shouting what the homework is and hurry up. I know I've been that teacher saying, quick guys, you've got to pack up, the next class is about to arrive, you're going to be late. And they've got to pack up quickly, grab their stuff, not forget their blazer, their homework, their pencil, get out the door, meet the crowd coming in, then get all the way across the campus to be on time for the next lesson. Doing that 8-9 times a day can be really stressful. And then when children show the physiological signs of stress, so tears or frozen silence, they can be described by some people as lacking in resilience, which is its kind of odd definition of well-being, isn't it? Resilience and endurance in the face of something that's fearful, useful in the short term, but it's not really a sustainable option over several years of schooling. I read a brilliant book called Changing Our Minds by Dr. Naomi Fisher, which I thoroughly recommend reading. And she says there is a problem. There is a problem for this system. The way we school children isn't designed for psychological flourishing. It's designed for curriculum delivery. And what I want to really stress here, really stress, is that I'm absolutely not talking about individual teachers here. They are the heroes often in this story. They're the ones that take their time before school and during break times to sit with children and help them. But it's the system. So the system is doing exactly what it was built to do, exactly what it was designed to do, which is to deliver a curriculum in a really hyper efficient way within the resources, the confines of the school building. And it's brilliant, but it isn't necessarily teaching a child or what human beings need to flourish. I mean, it's almost impossible to do when you take the current system as it is. And I think really, maybe that's the crux of it. That's the problem. So what do children need then to flourish at school or in a place? Three things. Autonomy. So that's a sense of control and choice over what we do. And when I start thinking about autonomy and times when we remove autonomy from humans, it's usually in a punishment, a place as a type of punishment. So I'm not comparing schools to prisons, but you take somebody, put them in prison as a punishment, and you're removing their autonomy. You're not even allowing them the choice in what they wear, when they eat, when they get to go outside and exercise. And of course, school, I'm not comparing schools directly to prison, but a child at home has true autonomy. They get to school, and increasingly, as they get older and through the school, their autonomy is kind of removed, which is a strange thing. If you look at graphs of happiness in children at preschool, early school, primary school, it tends to be a lot higher. It drops down in year 7 because we have to control them in a massed way. Competence, so a feeling that we are capable, that we are effective, that we can succeed. And the third condition is relatedness, so feeling connected to and accepted by others, which again is challenging for those marvellous teachers working in a system where there are hundreds and hundreds of children racing around through a building each day. When our basic psychological needs are met, we can learn. And when they're denied, we protect ourselves. And that can sometimes be by avoiding the place that feels unsafe. And so when these are met, we experience intrinsic motivation, so a desire to learn, a desire to engage and be curious and join in with sports and matches and art and whatever else is going on. When you look at like typical traditional schooling, and I'm thinking more of the Victorian-based schooling model, we give our children rigid timetables, fixed seating, uniforms. They're even told when they can and can't go to the loo, which for younger children, we kind of actively encourage them to go to the loo whenever we need to. They're often given lots of rewards and threats of punishments to control behaviour, and this can remove agency, remove autonomy. Competence, we have a lot of comparison, grading, high stakes testing, constant assessment, an increasing number of assessments, and they can make many children feel perpetually that they are just not good enough. And relatedness, there's crowded classrooms. Lots of children I've taught say they don't even know the names of everybody in their year group. They don't know the surnames of some of the children they go to school with. My own children often come home and they say sir or miss, and I say who, and it takes them a whole term to learn the name. It might just be my children not reading the timetable, but they don't know the name of their teacher. It's a funny disconnect. Like, how is that okay? How are the children allowed to go that long without knowing their teachers' names? You know, I nag mine and say, well, go and find out what your teacher's name is. And we look it up online. But why is that? It's sort of accepted as a thing that's totally fine. Limited relational time, so break times are pretty short. The use of detention and isolation to control behaviour, that can really fracture trust. And in some schools, where there seems to be an increasing trend to have silent corridors. So the one time that children get to connect with each other and chat and bond and ask questions about the lesson they've had, or where are we going next, which room is it, in a silent corridor, you totally remove that relatedness. A lot of children I work with as well say that they have silent lunches, which is great, I guess, if you want peaceful, silent, calm lunch for the teachers perhaps, or I don't know, but you're removing those opportunities to connect, which is a human need for flourishing. Um, just on rewards there, even rewards can become stressors. So if one house misses a treat because another got more points, a child can feel that they've let their team down. And there are places where houses are rewarded for attendance rates. Well, if you have a child who's really struggling to get to school, for emotional reasons, I mean, how rubbish is that? That then your classmates turn on you and say, "Oh, you meant we didn't win the prize. We came last because we were in your class." I mean, that just makes it even worse. The Guardian newspaper recently reported that children were being given not just certificates for 100% attendance, but iPads. So is this motivation, or I don't know, could we go so far as to say it's social shame dressed up as encouragement? I don't know. I mentioned before about early years. Let's have a look here. So early years, we have free flow between indoors and outdoors. Children are allowed to follow their curiosity. They can go to the loo when they need to. They're encouraged to. They can have a snack when they're hungry. And if you ask them if they enjoy school, the vast majority say yes, they really do. But you get to year 7 with bells, blazers, 50-minute lessons, permission to go to the loo, sanctions, rewards. And so many of them say that, well, one child said, I don't enjoy, I just endure. And they say they're counting down the days, weeks, months, years till they can leave. And it's only 84 months till I can get out of school. They understand why they need to go to school, but they're not enjoying school. I had a conversation with the owner of a group of schools and about just this. And he said, well, we have to cater for the middle of the bell curve. I'm going to argue that there is another way. I totally understand where he's coming from. I get that. But there is perhaps a paradigm B, a different frame. Often just subtle tweaks that could benefit. Here's a crazy idea. Everyone, so everybody improve. Even the middle of the bell curve could improve. I'm arguing for. So here goes. This is a conversation I had with a teacher, and she said, "Isn't it weird? We're trained to spot the signs of distress, and our safeguarding training tells us what to look out for." And she said, if a child told us they dreaded going home, that they cried silently every night with their family, we would definitely call it a safeguarding concern. So why, when they say the exact same thing about school, do we call it non-attendance? Why do we shift the problem to the child? And I've got a quote here that a child was told, the safeguarding team said, "You have to come in, it's the law. We wouldn't want mummy and daddy getting a letter from the officials, would we? You will thank us for this one day." I'm not so sure. So let's return to the boy at the beginning of the talk. When we look at some of the things he said, and these are direct quotes, there is a bit of a theme emerging. So he says, school feels like a prison. I'm trapped. I have no say in anything that happens to me. It's kind of like that lack of autonomy he's describing there. And I just want to be a normal boy. I want to be able to go to school. I'm so sorry. That feels like a lack of competence. And I've cried silently every maths lesson this term. My teacher hasn't noticed. The rest of that conversation went, I'm really glad I wear glasses because it means the tears don't splash onto the page. No one understands me. I feel very alone. Sometimes I think the only way to stop feeling like this would be to die, but that would upset my parents and sisters. And that feels like a lack of connectedness. As I said before, the numbers are rising. So if I haven't convinced you already that this is something we really need to talk about, the numbers are telling us that that emotional distress in relation to school attendance is not marginal. It is still growing. So before the pandemic, all causes of absence were approximately at 4 to 5%. 2021 to 2022, it rose to approximately 7.6%. The Together Trust reported that between 2023 and 2024, 22 to 24, the number of families they supported with EBSA related issues doubled. Oh, sorry, there's a lag there. Yeah, 2022 to 23, there were approximately 150,000 severely absent children, which is an increase of about 30,000 on the previous year. Waiting lists for CAMS are increasing. And the boy I mentioned at the beginning was referred to CAMS. That's the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. They were referred by the school to CAMS for support, and CAMS said that because he had a supportive family, it would be an 18-month to 2-year waiting time for help. He wouldn't be a priority. The diagnoses are increasing, so school systems really are going to have to respond in some way. I think that's a given. So a behaviour first approach, it doesn't really work, and it's kind of what's happening a lot of the time. Not in every school at all, and as I say, there are some incredible teachers doing amazing work, but they're doing this work within the confines of a system that doesn't really work with the child, I don't think. So just get them in doesn't, it fails. If exposure to school happens while the panic is present, then the brain is learning exactly the wrong lesson. It's learning school is dangerous. I was right. So you might get attendance for a short while, but underneath, the threat is being reinforced. And that's why we see cycles of brief improvement followed by a complete collapse. A little bit of improvement and then off for a prolonged period of time. What actually works would be, what makes sense is to intervene upstream. So before the behaviour follows. So if we can reduce baseline arousal, reduce how threatening school feels, then when we do that, something really important happens. The child kind of starts to think again, and they can recover flexibly at their own pace. They begin to engage, not because they're forced, but because they can. They simply can. They are no longer feeling the same level of threat. Behaviour changes by itself. And sometimes I think it's quite an arrogant view that without adults telling a child how to behave, we think that they'll never learn how to behave. And really our kind of strict disciplinarian approach is really not that old in the time scale of human culture. It's only really a couple of hundreds of years old. If you go to other places around the world, you don't see the same sorts of behaviour. So maybe there's something wrong with our approach. So here's this is totally hypothetical, this case study. So imagine we have Jo, she's 13. She's just moving to secondary school the previous year. She's in year 1, year 2. She's presenting with panic in the mornings, feeling sick, crying, refusing to enter the building. Now, she doesn't have any learning difficulties identified and she's academically able. So if we go with a behaviour first intervention, which is well intended and common practice, what happens is the school will hold attendance meetings with parents, and they lay out a clear expectation that Jo really has to come to school every day. It's the law, and the school will often say we have to make sure that you attend. It's our obligation, and there's new legislation from the government saying that we have to raise our attendance rates or at least keep them high. We've all had that letter with parents on here, the one telling you that if your child attends more than 98% of the time that they're going to get better GCSE results and earn more by the time they're 25. So the pressure is there from the authorities to the school to the parents. Everybody's feeling it. Initially, the school might offer Jo a reduced timetable, but she is expected to remain once she's in school, to stay, but maybe she can have a Miss French or something, go to the library for some quiet time. And the staff encourage her, encouraged to say, just get her through the gate, she'll settle, she just needs to get used to it, be a bit more resilient. And when Jo panics, the staff reassure her, you can come to the library, you can sit quietly. They reason with her, they might insist that she goes to school. She's praised for bravery, so the staff might meet the parents at the end of the day and say, oh, Jo stayed all day, it was brilliant, we've given her a gold star, this is excellent. She keeps on doing this, maybe she can be rewarded. Any distress escalations are met with firmer boundaries. So come on, you've done yesterday, there's no reason why you can't do it again today. So this might look like Jo being physically escorted into school, or spending lessons silent or unable to interact. She might occasionally bolt from class or come up with different reasons, excuses to leave the room. She needs to go to the loo, wash her hands, and things she could think of. And the teachers might say, yeah, she's here, but she's really not very engaged in school life. The neural reality is that her reticular activating system remains in hyperarousal. So she's still got her filter set to high alert. And the salience network, her filter, is tagging school as an inescapable threat. And it's filtering what she's experienced to reinforce that belief. So this is a really threatening place. Look, that just happened, that just happened. And this panic during exposure, her time at school, reinforces her fear learning. The outcome, initially she might improve her attendance because most of the time, well, children really want to do well, they want to learn, they want to please. But her morning panic starts worsening, her sleep deteriorates, and eventually Jo might refuse completely and stop leaving the house. But what if the school would conclude, sorry, we tried everything, it didn't work. We're really sorry, good luck. And then the family have to deal with a burnt out child with a lot of worries. If they work, it makes it even harder. And the child will probably know that and feel bad for putting pressure on the family when they need to go out and work. If we look at a hypothetical ideal scenario of a nervous system first intervention, it might look like this. So what the school does differently, attendance targets are paused explicitly. So you do not have to attend. We're not even going to think about attendance targets. Don't worry. We know there's a problem. We know you're struggling. And there's an agreement made that Jo could leave at any point with absolutely no consequences. They might move her start time to later and she can arrive via a quiet entrance. And there's one trusted staff member to meet Jo every morning, somebody who she gets on well with and has a good relationship with. An initial expectation is just that she sits in a calm room doing something nice. She doesn't actually have to work. And then day to day, this would look like Jo arriving sometimes and leaving after just 10 minutes. But there is no escalation when she leaves. So if she wants to leave, that's fine. The adults remain calm and predictable at all times. This is key. And over time, Jo will begin to stay longer without being asked. And she might even then start choosing to sit in a lesson with a trusted adult nearby. Now, I appreciate for any teachers on there listening to this, the trusted adult nearby, it's almost impossible to find a trusted adult nearby who isn't teaching or busy. Our school TAs do the most incredible job and they're pulled and stretched in a million different directions. So as I say, this is the ideal scenario. It's probably not a reality, realistic option for many places. But the neural reality is baseline arousal will gradually lower. You're lowering stress. The salience of school cues reduces, and perhaps there's some positive ones building as well. The safety signals become more precise, so less generalised to school, but specifically this teacher, that subject, that space, that room. And cortical engagement slowly returns, so you're able to start thinking and engaging in the lessons properly. And the outcome is that the panic episodes reduce in intensity. Recovery is faster when Jo is distressed, and she might begin suggesting the next steps herself. And her attendance could increase more slowly, but whilst it does, it's more reliable, it stabilises. And the outcome, as the school would say, once she felt safe, the rest followed, which we all know, Maslow's hierarchy, we need to feel safe first, physically safe, and then emotionally safe before the other things follow on. So I think the problem lies in what schools worry about versus what actually happens. So the schools will say, oh, we can't remove attendance pressure. And if we remove this pressure to attend, they'll never come back. And remember, they're under huge pressure from the government. Or if we let the child off school, we're reinforcing avoidance. Other schools will expect the same, etc. But what actually happens is if you remove attendance pressure, you're lowering the threat salience, making the return possible rather than impossible. Reinforcing avoidance, no. The nervous system is recovering from threat. It's not learning avoidance. So safety has to precede engagement. Other students will expect the same. Well, if you have a clear individualised plan, they do not generalise. They're specific to that child. And most students, if you ask them, don't want reduced expectations. They want to be normal, to fit in, to learn, to engage. A school might worry that children need to learn that school is non-negotiable, but coercion increases panic conditioning. Predictability and choice reduce it. They might say it's unfair and unsustainable, but I'd argue that actually crisis-driven absence is more resource-intensive than planned, flexible support. If we let them leave, they'll leave every time. The research doesn't say that. Knowing that a child can leave often means that they don't need to. I do appreciate I'm generalising massively here. It's of course more complex and more nuanced in real life. So what can schools actually do? They can have a safe place, a trusted person, and really importantly, access to them. So I've talked to children many times where they say, "Oh, as a teacher, I really like her. She's so kind. She really understands." But unfortunately, I'm not allowed to leave the room and just go to her. I have to be escorted because my school is an open site, or I have to have permission from the teacher. And if I ask the teacher for permission to leave the room, then that's too much. I have to tell the whole class, or he might ask me why, or she might ask me why. So having access to a trusted person is really key. Giving children agency wherever possible. And also, I mean, I know it's different, but also autonomy. Enriching learning with purpose and meaning. So again, not doing a worksheet for a worksheet's sake, but saying that learning has real purpose and meaning for you. Learning this piece of chemistry will really help you when you go on to do such and such, or learning to do this kind of maths will help you when you set up your own business on Etsy and you need to work out your profit share, something like that. Building predictability and co-regulation into every day is really important as well. And co-regulation is very different from compliance. Compliance removes autonomy and it removes ownership of the classroom community. It erodes trust. And worse, children are also missing out on the opportunity to develop self-regulation skills. So it could be something as simple as asking their advice. So how should we do today's lesson? Do you want to start with this or start with that? Or, we've got 2 tasks today. Who would like to decide which one we do at the beginning? Do we want to write in pencil or pen? Tiny little choices, which are very easy to weave in. Once you introduce those, it gives a child a sense of autonomy, that they have some choice. Reduce stressful transitions. Some schools give up bells. One school I work with put really beautiful, peaceful meditation music in the corridors. And I have to say, I wasn't convinced it would work, but it really did work. And the children sort of glided down the corridors and they said they felt much nicer. You can also stagger transitions between age groups and buildings, even by 1 minute. 30 seconds is great. Let one group out before the next group start to arrive in. Creating sensory aware classrooms. There are some brilliant books on this right now. And it's really about teachers taking time to think, what does this classroom feel like, sound like, look like? How could I make it feel like a nicer environment to be in? Is it freezing cold by the window? Is there an annoying noise? Are the lights flickery? Is it very crowded and visually confusing? And is this a nice environment that a child would want to sit in? Putting relationships before attendance targets. Most teachers do this and they are brilliant, but they're doing this despite enormous pressure from the system to get children into school, to achieve high assessment results. But relationships really are key. Using flexible timetables on those children, for those children who really struggle. Can they come in a little bit later? Doing 3/4 of a day is better than no day. Training staff in stress and trauma responses. I think most schools are doing that already. They've kind of tried tough love for a century, and perhaps it's time for just love now. And I'm involved with a group of teachers designing a school for the future. So we're a group not just of teachers, but school leaders, people who have set schools up in the past. And we are aiming to give as much autonomy to children as possible. And we want to work with them as their partners, not above them. Trusting relationships will be woven through absolutely everything we do. So this is our kind of dream school spec, or what would the dream school look like. We want to have real world projects. So every single thing the children are doing at school, they know absolutely why this skill that they're learning will have a real world outcome and be useful for that outcome. If they're doing a piece of creative writing, it's not just going to be in the book, edited in green pen and then stuck in a folder somewhere. This is a piece of real world writing. So it might be put up on the wall in the local library. It might be published as part of a blog. It might go home in the school newsletter, but everything has to have purpose and meaning, because without purpose and meaning, it's very difficult to maintain intrinsic motivation. We will have real experts coming in, and we're going out to meet experts. So trips to workplaces to see their learning in action. That's so important. No punishments, no house point charts. So we will not be using stress to externally motivate. One of the saddest things I ever saw was a child who was feeling very anxious and nervous about school, was in school, trying really hard, just beginning to turn a corner. And to boost her along, the school said, "Oh, make her stand up, and we'll give her her 25th house point, which is the bronze award." And in front of a whole school of 400 or 500 children, everybody clapped and applauded. But they just didn't think through the next part. The next child to stand up was being given a certificate, rewarded for achieving 100 house points. So that was just a big dose of public humiliation, and it set that child back by weeks. No uniforms, probably a dress code of some description, but wear what makes you feel comfortable. For how many children is uniform an issue? It's scratchy, it's uncomfortable. A lot of secondary schools insist on having blazers on all the time. You're only allowed to take them off in the classroom. Well, if you're wearing a stiff blazer all day, that would really irritate me. Also, it would annoy me having to wear clothes that felt uncomfortable, but having to wear them. So I think we need a lot more flexibility about uniform, and perhaps switch to a dress code. Much longer, deeper learning blocks so that we can go deep and we can find flow and remove this constant churn of transition. So I think a dream school would have 2 or 3 lessons max a day. And then you can really go for it and take away that pressure. So the teachers aren't pressured and constantly feeling like they have to race through the curriculum. And really, this is the crux of it all. Is that this would be a school that prepares children for the real world by, here's a crazy idea, resembling it. So we let the children work in teams, collaborate, design projects, ask experts at each stage, and actually have a real world outcome. So a happy ending. Moving back to the boy I mentioned at the very beginning, he moved to a much smaller school, had a flexible start time, slightly delayed, or sometimes just going into a younger children's classroom to read with them. Regular meetings between him and the parents and a senior teacher and class teacher to plan the next 6 weeks, the next blocks of time. It just removed all the uncertainty and all the anxiety, and to kind of neutralise each potential problem. And at Christmas time, this boy was Joseph in the school play. He's playing in a rugby club, joined a tennis club, goes to a weekly drama club, and attendance is now up the high 80s, low 90s, which is absolutely amazing. And the reason that I have so much knowledge and feeling about this particular child is because actually he was my middle child, my son. We went through this and we weren't expecting it to happen, but we really went through the mill, and I happened to be a teacher at the same time, so I could see both sides of it. I was sitting as the parent, sitting as the teacher, and it was fascinating, and it just made me think this system is wrong. We've got this all wrong. We're going at this from the wrong angle. So I'm happy to say he's very happy now and all is well, but it's thanks to a school that have really understood him and taken the time to give him a very flexible day. So all good. And if you fancy joining us at the start of something powerful, please do get in touch. We're not here to tweak the current system. We're here to build what comes next and redesign education based around how a human brain actually learns in an environment that suits how humans are supposed to exist and live, very much preparing them for the future by resembling a real world in school. I think that leaves us with 15 minutes, 10 minutes for any questions at the end, if anybody has any.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Look at the amount of applause you're getting
Thank
from
you.
Zoom. And the chat is exploding with questions, actually.
Oh, wow. Can I see the chat?
If we could either ask people to unmute themselves if they want to ask the questions in person, or I can read out the questions.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, I have to go back. A few of the questions that were asked early on were kind of answered by your talk.
Yeah.
But Gemma Goldenberg, who is one of our members at SEN, says that at the Institute of the Science of Early Years and Youth, she's currently applying for research funding to look at the potential root cause, physiological stress caused by the sensory environment in schools. And there's currently no research looking at the links between factors like noise, crowding, visual clutter, lighting, so physiological stress and EBSA.
I've got a brilliant book I thought was on my desk, which is about just that. So, Gemma, I will my message through you, Lyrie. I'll direct you to a book and a brilliant person I know called Alice Hoyle, who works with other colleagues, not Pam as well, to do exactly this. So they're creating sensory aware schools. I think there is a huge need for that research, and it would be so appreciated by schools. But you're absolutely right. Noise, crowding, visual clutter, lighting. I spent much of my PhD looking at exactly that, the physical environment of a school and how it affects the cognitive functioning of the children in it. And when I had a non-for-profit in the northwest of England working with initially one school, and then it went down to, up to 12 schools. And the first thing we did in every single school was to change the physical environment. So stripping out all those crazy boards and washing lines of work. I would be doing insets with the staff and having to duck under them and thinking, how? I can't even concentrate and I'm the one speaking. So moving all that out into the corridors. Some schools were really, really attached to displaying the children's work. We said, fine, put it in the corridors, that's fine. Ideally not have it, but in the corridor. And then the classroom, if you could try and make it resemble a really lovely, like a living room that you'd love to sit in all day, that would be great. So we tried to increase light wherever possible. Sometimes that was literally unpinning fabric that had been draped over the windows. Improving ventilation, so CO2 monitors in every single room. When an alarm that went off, we had CO2 monitors. We outsourced a lot of the maintenance of that to the children, so there'd be a CO2 monitor. If the alarm went off, the child would go and open the window and they wouldn't have to interrupt the lesson or disturb the teacher. And we put pot plants on every desk, or little mini gardens. And you think, oh, that definitely won't work. It did work in our schools. The children loved it. If you have children that can't help fiddling and messing around with them, then you'll have to stick them on a windowsill. But just seeing green plants feels really nice. And surprisingly, when we got the children's feedback and says, what is it about these class? We did half the classrooms so that we had a bit of a comparison. What is it you like about them? And it was the desk lamps. For some reason, having a lamp on the teacher's desk made the whole room feel cozy and lovely. We had a couple of schools where parents donated an armchair. I know it's difficult on a school budget, it's very tight, but I think if you ask the parents, is anyone just a lamp, a few lamps, or a chair, beanbag, cushions, anything. Another school had a basket full of yoga mats, and they'd push the desks back and do a quick, a mindful sort of 10 minutes before the afternoon lessons. So it all really helped. But I would love to, direct you, Gemma, to that book. And yes, I think we do need some research in that. When it feels nice, it's nice.
There was another question about books, actually, so that was quite timely.
Mm.
There's a question from Nancy about how to reduce the fear of children to speak up, may feel that they are punished by the system rather than being supported, like placing a child in a different seat to avoid bullying may lead to the child think, if I share my worries, adults will ask me to do something I don't wish to do. When children choose their seat, they try to be closer to their best friends or someone that makes them feel better. Separating the bond will feel like a punishment.
Yeah, I hear you. I also have children who absolutely can't bear being allowed to choose their own seat because people don't pick them or they're too nervous or too shy. Um, I used to try and get around that by when I was teaching science up until a year ago in year 7 and 8, I'd say pick a partner, pick one other person, then I'll tell you two where to sit. Or I'd say I'd put half of them in every other seat and then the others could fill in the gaps. There is nothing worse than being the child at the end of the seating plan who no one wants to sit with. Um, but I wonder as well, how could we, well, I think reducing the fear of children speaking up, most of it's done through modelling with the teacher. If you have, it's much harder in a secondary school when you only see the children twice a week or 3 times a week. But certainly in a primary setting, you model how to speak up, and it's a skill that you build. As the children get older, you have it as your class rules that will respect each other, will listen, and you teach them how to engage in conversation that doesn't offend people, or get them to stand up for themselves. And I need to, if the teacher misunderstands what I'm saying, I need to make sure I get that really clear. But yeah, it's a really good point. But modeling it, I think, and checking in with children afterwards, is that okay? But the teacher shouldn't make a child feel like if they speak up, then they're going to be punished in some way. That's definitely a relational thing.
Absolutely. There's a few questions about your email address. So if that's okay, I just pasted your email
Oh,
address into the
yes.
chat.
Yeah. Yes, that's no
And
problem.
just to remind everyone, the recording will be available on the YouTube channel for the Sen, so you can always watch it again. There was also a question about whether your slides would be made available. So I don't know how you feel about sharing your slides.
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, I will send them. I'll send them to you after this.
Thank
If
you.
that's
There
okay.
was another question about the jump from if you have the opportunity to go to a safe room or with a trusted adult, going back to the classroom afterwards can be very, very overwhelming. And how do you
Mm.
overcome that?
That's a really great question. I'm just thinking of, in my experience, the children I've worked with don't tend to go back. They stay till the end of the lesson and they jump in at the beginning of the next one because I think it would be pretty overwhelming. Um, I think that's something that each different school handles in their own way. Um, but no, I can really appreciate that. Again, it's how the school handles it, how the teacher handles the re-entry. Um, and that's where I think some quite careful buddying up with people is really useful. So I was a science teacher, so it was very easy in science because it's a practical subject, so everybody's moving around all the time. And if somebody comes back in, you can sort of greet them at the door and say, "Brilliant, could you possibly write up the results with this group here and work with them?" Give them a specific task and a specific activity. I hope no teacher would ever stare at the child and let them just, announce their way in. There'd be a knock and you'd go out, meet the child. Another technique would be to have a trusted buddy in the class that you know about. We had that system at my last school. And if a child wants to re-enter, then knock gently on the door, or another member of staff brings them, and then you get the buddy. You go out with the buddy, give those two a little task or an activity, or can you just fill this person in on what we've been doing, and then they come back in together. I think the most important thing is to let the child decide. They may be overwhelmed and not have any idea of what could help. So suggesting we could have a buddy, you'd come in with me, you can join in with a practical, you can join in at the beginning of the next lesson. What do you feel most comfortable with? That would be how I'd approach it. So make sure that the child is very much part of the conversation.
It's part of this autonomy that you were talking about
Mm,
and the competence.
yeah.
I'm trying to be fair with the questions because there's so many, but perhaps I'll make the chat available later so people can email you or you can address if there's any specific question. But I'll just read out a few more if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Philip asks, how does one manage the shame of being different for those kids in a culture where the dominant norms are still institutionalized curriculum learning and obedience, etc.? Avoidance is a rational response by those different kids, unfortunately. Does it almost feel like alternative educational and other paths like science prove the benefits so critical mass can accumulate for changing the dominant norms?
Well, I can't see. Do you say that was from Chris?
It's Philip.
Philip, sorry, I just saw Philip. Philip, that is exactly why I want to set my own school up. Yeah, I think there has to be a change in education. I'm like going, yes, in my head. You're right. This is part of the problem. I do think that schools are changing massively in the right direction, with accepting children who are all very different. And I think it's much easier to be a little bit different now. There are some schools who have embraced, for example, neurodiversity in a big way, and the children own it, and it's a superpower, and they've been really successful. There's others where children are absolutely terrified that their diagnosis will get out and that other people will find out and use it against them. That's with neurodiversity. Uh, but emotionally based school avoidance tends to concur, is much higher in children who are neurodivergent than those who aren't. But I agree. I think once you get out into the real world, then having these sort of superpowers, these specific skill sets that come with being different, really come into the fore, and it's great. My last job was teaching in Dyson, and we would occasionally have students from the Dyson Academy. So they were they're doing a graduate scheme there, and or in lieu of a degree, and they would come and do placements. And I remember one of them saying, "It is so great. We're taught so much about neurodiversity at Dyson that we actually were actively encouraged to explore this, and it becomes one of our skill sets." So if you had particular special interest in how engines work, you'd go into that channel. If you were very creative and you had amazing ideas, but perhaps you'd struggle with organization, that would be fine, that you'd be supported on a more creative area. So I think industry is changing. I think schools definitely are changing. Society is definitely changing. It's just seems to be my frustration is that the system from the top down isn't changing. It's not changing quick enough, and I think we're failing so many children. Um, so yeah, there was also a huge increase in alternative, or not alternative, progressive with a small p schools emerging in my area where I live alone, around Bath. This September, there were 3 new schools opening, none of whom would fit in the traditional um, brackets. They're all great schools. We're also trying our hardest to get going, and there are more micro schools, more home education hubs that operate for 3 days where children can learn in a way that suits that natural human flourishing. So that there is a change. I think the education system itself needs to change, and I think that the teachers who are doing such a brilliant job need the space to be able to do that. I think if you got most classroom teachers and you said, okay, design a school system, I think most of them would probably do it quite differently. And they are, every day, I really do admire them for what they do within the constraints.
Within the constraints.
Mm.
There's another question from Kath, and she says, thank you so much for this. Do you think that narrowing of the curriculum of the last 15 years, removal of the arts movements, for example, plus the raising of academic expectations and the prevalence of no excuses type behavior management approaches has had an impact on rising levels of ESNA?
I think 100%. Yeah, definitely. I had a meeting 2 days ago with somebody who's a deputy head and an artist, and she wrote her own curriculum for primary school where art was through every single subject, and she said it's absolutely crazy. She left teaching partly because art was removed. She said, how can you express yourself as a human without art? You're taking a piece of yourself and you are expressing it in the painting, in the drawing, in the clay, in whatever. And you can weave art through every single subject. It does not have to be this segmented subject stuck in a silo. And if you remove that one creative output, you're denying children really part of what it is to be human, to express yourself. I think also the rise of, as you just said, there's these very strict school models. We know silent corridors and absolute perfect uniform and immaculate discipline and attendance. I think for some people they thrive in that. Great. But it would be lovely to see more different systems so that you have choice over which kind of system suits you. But definitely a narrowing of the curriculum can only have harm. I mean, when you look back to your own school time, for me it was subjects like art, DT. I really didn't enjoy science. But I hated a lot of science. It was only afterwards I realised how incredible it could be. But when I teach science, I can't resist weaving art into it. So I've just been learning about fish and dissecting fish, and then we made fish prints, which is an ancient Japanese form of art, fish printing, goitaku, and they go on the walls, and then we label the fish. I dissected a heart today with a child, and afterwards we drew a beautiful diagram, a beautiful picture of it, and decided how we would express different things and what it felt like. And so yeah, I think we need more creative arts, more movement, normalise that, and trust that in every child there is a module in their brain where they want to learn, they want to please, and they want to contribute to the tribe, the family, the school. And really, it's quite amazing that we managed to turn so many of them off a love of learning.
Absolutely. We have 1 more minute. Shall we find one more question?
Yes.
Jenny says, I work in a small specialist school which supports learners who have experience in EBSA, many of whom are neurodivergent. My question is about scale. We have 21 learners maximum and wonder how the brilliant skills of the staff, a lot of which align with what you have discussed today, can be scaled to bigger schools and more learners, therefore.
Oh, that's a great question. I'd love to know the answer myself. I think they are. I think somewhere like LinkedIn is a brilliant place where you see these kinds of teachers spreading wonderful messages. But I don't know. I haven't got the answer to that. I would love to. I would love to. In my kind of dream career now is to design the dream school, the school that's designed around human flourishing, and then scale it. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Mm.
I met a school, in fact, definitely go and look these guys up. It's called the Hummingbird School in Somerset, and it's founded by Bo Lotto, the neuroscientist. He wrote the book a brilliant book. And his name is just gone. I can see the front cover of it. It'll come to me in a second. But he's founded a school based exactly on that. What are the things that a human brain needs to flourish? And it's a wonderful place. Only opened in September. There are definitely little ripples and changes coming, and I think if enough of us get out there and start pushing and pushing, those ripples can become waves, and maybe we'll start to slowly sort of erode the castle of the system, and make it give parents and families more of a choice.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be great. Also, I've just seen on the chat, Tracy Tokuhama Espinoza. I don't know if you're still on the chat, but I quoted your work a great deal through my PhD. So thank you so much for coming and listening to me tonight. You've been a really inspiring researcher, and I really appreciate everything you've done.
That'd be lovely. I think she's left, but we
Oh,
will
she has.
definitely let her know.
Yes, I read her books, devoured them. They were brilliant.
That's brilliant. I think we've come to the end of our time. Rebecca, thank you so much. You can see in the chat and all of the reactions on Zoom how everybody's so passionate about this topic, and your passion.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
contagious and beautiful. Thank you so very much. So your talk will be available on the YouTube
Yeah.
channel, and your email has been put in the chat. I will try to find a way to include the chat in the video that when we post it, because there's so many interesting questions and people are exchanging references and resources, and it's just absolutely wonderful to see all the engagement. So thank you all of you as well for being such an amazing audience.
Thank you very
Um,
much for having me. Yeah, I've just seen, sorry, in the chat, the Waldorf education is amazing. There's schools like Brockwood School in Hampshire, amazing. Lumiar, which is a Brazilian model, it's just opened their first secondary school in the UK. So there definitely is a sea change coming. There's some amazing places doing
and
amazing things.
Montessori, the stuff that you're
Yes, yes, yeah,
there's there are definitely we're seeing. Hopefully, we'll see it expand in a bigger scale.
yeah. The sooner the better.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And we will look forward to seeing you all next week for our next SEN seminar.